Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly and today I'm joined with Dr. Rita Roussos. Dr. Roussos is a native Athenian who has taught archaeology and art history at the American University of Athens and is a trained archaeologist who has worked on sites like Isthmia, Kato and Mantinea. If you didn't already know, World History Encyclopedia has teamed up with Adante Travels and designed a tour in Greece exclusively for our readers, which combines the must-see sites with places that lie off the beaten track, and Rita will be the travel guide for the tour. So today, we're going to ask her all about her archaeological background and what you can expect from this amazing tour. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rita. It's a pleasure talking to you. Do you want to tell us a bit about why you became an archaeologist?
Right. At the age of about 8, I my parents started taking us to museums. We left Athens and moved to the UK. So we went to the in London. We went to the British Museum and the Natural Science Museum, and that was my first introduction, let's say, to antiquities that I can remember. Then, about the age of 12, I became very much interested in the Mary Renault books, The King Must Die, and that series. And then in the last semester of high school, I was introduced to Homer's Odyssey, and that's where my first strong feeling came in. So I entered archaeology from ancient literature. So I started with the classics, and I studied ancient Greek and Latin first, and then I went into archaeology from there, which I think is very important because you really do need to know your literature. Because I'm a classical archaeologist, I'm not a prehistorian, so I really need the literature the sources are important. They're not the most important thing, but they are very important. So I became an archaeologist because I fell in love with ancient Greek literature, basically. And
Amazing. I
and
love
and
that. And
yeah,
it must
yeah,
be wonderful to be able to read it in ancient Greek as well. I mean, that's something that lots of
yeah,
classicists work towards.
yeah.
It's probably a whole.
It's quite yeah. It's quite you feel quite satisfied when you can do that. It's
Oh,
really you feel
definitely.
like you've accomplished something.
Amazing. So you
So,
said
so that's the why I started.
your why is the why you started. So you're a classical archaeologist. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the kinds of things that you have worked on, or if you have any favorite sites and
Well,
why? Yeah.
I've worked in terms of archaeological sites. I've worked mainly in the Peloponnese. So Isthmia is one of my favorite sites because it's the first site, and it has um, many different levels of history going back to the Mycenaean. So there was a lot there when I got there. There was already it had already been excavated. Um, Although I worked on the Byzantine section of it, which was interesting, but it was also quite important to see all the other levels that had been excavated. So Isthmia is very close to Corinth, um, and it's an important site because it's one of the places where you have Pan-Hellenic games. So together with Olympia, where we will visit, Izmir is another site. We will visit Delphi. So we will visit two of the Pan-Hellenic sites for the Pan-Hellenic games. And so Izmir was important because of that. I also enjoyed working in a place called Kato Lossous, which is in Arcadia and in Mantinea. But Izmir was definitely my favorite. My area, is classical archaeology, but I focus on the role of women in antiquity. So women's place in ancient Greece and Rome is where my focus is. Um, and that's where most of my research is in that area, and fourth century sculpture. So that's my general focus.
Fascinating. What two great specialties to work on. I mean, and I definitely think that women in the ancient world in general is definitely something that people are focusing on a lot more. I would probably say. Would you agree that
Yeah,
it's
when I started, it it, it was the role of women, and through time, they the focus has become more specialized. So there's more. Lately, I've noticed there's a lot of work done on clothing and textiles and weaving and plush furnishings, pillows and textiles in general, soft furnishings. Um, and so the role of women, but more what they produced also, um, is has become more popular, um, than when I was studying.
mm,
Um,
that's brilliant. Did you have any challenges when it came to finding that kind of evidence in the sites that you've worked on, or have some of them really given you quite a lot to work with?
no, nothing. Well, I mean,
Nothing.
you do find. I mean, I haven't. You find cooking utensils and cooking paraphernalia, pots and things, or you find um, um, loom weights. I found, um, but nothing interesting. Nothing. Well, not in. I shouldn't say not in. They're all interesting, but they're not, grave goods, where you have more, maybe a little bit more luxury, like clothespins or jewelry that's found with the burials. We didn't have that kind of excitement. Um, but there are always interesting things that you find. Um,
Oh, definitely.
um,
For sure. I mean, I feel like cooking utensils would be fascinating.
yeah, um, but broken pots are not as fascinating as amphora or something something. I mean, a painted pot is always more interesting than coarse ware, something that's not as refined, perhaps. What we'll see on this tour is actually rather interesting because we get to visit Thebes,
Mm.
which is a site that's well, it's a city that has a fantastic museum, and it's small. The museum is small enough, but you do see a lot of everyday object going back to prehistoric period all the way to
Wow.
Byzantine period. So that's um, one of my favorite museums, actually. Speaking of favorite sites, I'd like to throw in one of my favorite museums too,
How
in,
wonderful.
in the city of Thebes.
So it's pretty exciting that you're going to take this tour for specifically for our readers and for our viewers. Like that's pretty phenomenal. Do you want to tell us a bit about the tour and the sites that you're going to be visiting?
Right. So we're going to start with Athens, and it's very difficult for me to pick my favorite site because it's like trying to asking me to pick my favorite child, and it's really hard. There are every site has something that's extraordinary about it, but we will start in Athens, and Athens um, has the Acropolis, which is the Parthenon, which is quite spectacular, and it's always more impressive when you see it. Even though I visited so many times, every time I go, I find it incredibly extraordinary because the Parthenon really is quite impressive. Um, the other thing that I think is important about Athens is that we will walk around the agora, the ancient marketplace, the agora. We will walk around the ancient theater, where the tragedy, where Sophocles and Euripides and Aristophanes had their plays. So to see to walk it, um, to walk through this and climb up to the Acropolis is something that is quite impressive. And of course, the Acropolis Museum is very, very impressive. So um, our day, our the tour begins at a very high note, and from then on, I think it just gets better because um, we go to Thebes, which I just mentioned is one of the best museums in the country, as far as I'm concerned. Thebes is a city that has an ancient city that has such incredible amount of history and myth. Um, Even Packard from Hewlett Packard, the man who works in computers, and he wanted in the 80s and 1980s, he wanted to buy Thebes and excavate it. They didn't sell it to him, but because all the ancient city, which is so famous, is underneath the modern city. So there are pockets of excavations, but he wanted to tear down the modern city and get to the antiquities. Um, Thebes is quite a remarkable town. Um, and then from Thebes, we go to visit a very important tomb, prehistoric tomb at the town of Orchomenos, which is a very unusual. I don't want to give away the punchline, but it's an incredible tomb. It's one of its kind. It belongs to the civilization that is called the Minions, so it kind of predates Mycenaeans. But it's a very unusual tomb. I'll stop there. Then we go to Delphi, and Delphi is an extraordinary site. Um, Delphi is, uh, besides the oracle of Apollo, that's so important and famous, the setting of the town, the setting of the sanctuary to Apollo is so dramatic that it really, you almost have to stop and look out beyond the ancient, beyond the antiquities to nature around you because it's so dramatic. The way it's perched up on the side of a hill, um, in the middle of nowhere, really. Even today, it's just the little village that caters to the tourists, just as it would have in antiquity. A little town that caters to the pilgrims, let's say, that would go to the oracle. It's a very interesting and very dramatic setting, and it's also Delphi is the navel of the earth, right? It's the omphalos. It's Zeus sends out these two eagles to show where the center of the world is, let's say, and they meet at Delphi. So it's a very, as dramatic as that sounds, or as romantic as that sounds, the setting of Delphi really is quite incredible. And then we move on to from Delphi, we cross over a bridge, and we get to Olympia. Olympia is the place for the Olympic Games. They started in 776, but Olympia is 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 surrounded by two rivers, so it can get very swampy. Keeping the water at bay and keeping the silt away is quite a task at Olympia. But Olympia is again a very vast site with a lovely museum and incredible sculpture and things in the museum. And it's something to actually go out into the stadium where they would run in antiquity and put your toes on the starting line. that's still there. The original starting line is in situ. So you can curl your toe. Everybody, they ran barefooted, of course, and nude. We don't ask our guests to run in the nude, but they can certainly take off their tennis shoes and put their toes in the starting line if they like, or not, and just run down the stadium. And and many actually like to do that, and it's quite an experience. And then we go on to Epidaurus, where we see the famous theater that has these incredible acoustics. And in the past, although we're not allowed to have people perform in the middle of the orchestra, many of the guests like to stand in the middle and recite poetry or sing. The guards usually blow their whistle because they don't like tourists to do that. It's Epidaurus on the one hand is famous because of the theater, but Epidaurus is not famous only for the theater. It was a health spa, so it was a sanctuary. It was a combination of religion and health spa, hospital, theater. All of these elements came together for the improvement of health on one level, or and there's also the architecture there is quite impressive, and there's a lot of preservation and partial reconstruction that has been going on. So this is a really good opportunity, a really good time to go visit Epidaurus. And then after Epidaurus, we move on to Mycenae and Tiryns, which are the two prehistoric palaces that we will visit. Whenever it should, I guess, be noted that whenever you hear of Mycenaean citadel, we all have to remember that means walking up. So we have to walk up to the citadel. So we have to be ready for some sturdy walking shoes days. And Mycenaean Tiryns are two of those examples. But they're both incredible in terms of their the massive stone constructions and the use of these cyclopean walls. And then we finish off with Corinth, which is a site that is difficult, not because there's not much there, but because there's so much there that it kind of all blends together. And Corinth is another one of these towns that the excavators wanted to buy up the land around the ancient site and dig more thoroughly. But that means taking people's homes away. So you can only buy land to such an extent. You can't keep buying it forever and displacing people. That's not very, very nice. And then after Corinth, of course, we'll go to the National Museum in Athens, which is a treasure trove. And there's some unbelievable things. One of the most interesting things is that we get to see in the museum is where the ancient, what is called the first computer is housed, this Antikythera mechanism that was found with something like 42 gears that was used to navigate. And it's quite impressive because modern engineers have tried to recreate what this might have looked like. So what we will see the object as it was found in a shipwreck, and next to it are the proposals for what it might have looked like. So it's quite impressive. Yeah, so there's a lot to see, and I think there's something for all tastes. Whether you're a prehistorian or you're a classical archaeologist or you're Roman, Corinth, basically, the majority of what we will see in Corinth is Roman. But there's some Frankish section. There was a Frankish mission that was set up in Corinth and has been recently excavated. And we will also have our speaker in Corinth, who was the excavator of the Frankish mission there. So there's lots and lots of time periods that we will cross. So
How
I think,
exciting.
yeah, and the food is good, and
Yeah, Greek food is
we will be
brilliant.
staying in. I didn't mention this, but we will be staying in the town of Nafplion, from where we will be traveling to Epidaurus, Mycenae, and Tiryns. Nafplion is a very quaint little town. It has Venetian fortifications. It has Turkish fortifications. It's a very artsy town by the sea. So it's a great place to go for walks in the so it's the hotels we'll be staying at are also in nice areas, um, and quaint hotels usually, I think, from what I remember. Um, yeah, so I guess people could um, be overloaded with information because there's so much to see in a short period of time. But when you get to your hotel at night and you have your glass of wine or whatever, and you can start to absorb it all, and we're always available for questions or if things are not clear when the information's delivered because there's so much that is thrown at the guests, just the matter of the tour. Um,
Mm.
we're always available to answer questions and clarify. So
It sounds brilliant. So by the sounds of it, it's just going to be a jam-packed tour of these phenomenal sites, and there'll be so much to learn, so much to see. But then there'll also be a nice, relaxing hotel to go to at the end of the
yes,
day.
yes, exactly.
That
And
sounds
in the
beautiful.
area of Nafplion, they have in the area that we'll be in is called the Argolid, and there's some local wine that is quite interesting. It's red, and it's called the blood of Heracles because Heracles is native to that. Well, I mean, he's Tiryns is where the king gave him his labors, so he is quite active in that area. He kills the Nemean lion just down the road from Tiryns. So the blood of Heracles is now the name given to this local red wine that is quite nice. So they can, the guests can also sample the food and the wine. I think that people who come on this will find that there's so much information that they probably didn't even think uh, they would get. There's
Mm.
it might feel a bit overwhelming at times, but there are periods that they can relax and just soak it in
Mm.
and and not feel like it's over their heads. Um,
Brilliant.
so
Well, that the tour sounds phenomenal, and so now everyone knows that they're going to have a very intelligent and educated woman taking them on the tour, giving them all of this information and knowledge. If you're interested in the tour, you can check it out down below. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Rita. It's been brilliant.
you're very, very welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It's been
Pleasure.
interesting, and I hope I get to see everybody um, in October.
This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia. For more great articles and interactive content, head to our website via the link below. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organisation and you can find us on Patreon, a brilliant site where you can support our work and receive exclusive benefits in return. Your support helps us create videos twice a week, so make sure to check it out via the pop-up in the top corner of the screen or via the Patreon link down below. Thank you so much for watching and we'll see you soon with another video.